We're in a situation in this day and age. You've got a great website, everyblm.com. We're in a situation today where there is a push from the radical left to make everybody believe, from you and me to our kids. I've got 5 daughters, that this is a racist country. We've got to completely remake the country because of our horrible history. And you're out here saying, well, hold on a second. Let's tell the real history. Just as an overview, before we get into the details of it, what is it that was the impetus for you to say, hold on a second, let's just take a breath here and let's look at real history?
Well, the impetus was, we're being told for some reason, you have all of your CRT proponents, from Kendi to Derek Bell to, all of these folks, to D'Angelo, all these folks that are well-written academics and intellectuals. And they have all of their, all these periodicals and everything that they've written, but they seem to overlook a vital part of our history. And that vital part of our history, that they seem to, gratuitously overlook, is the 1800s.
Yeah.
And, but they don't really overlook it. They just say, in general, all whites are racist. All whites were complicit with slavery. All whites, they overlay that all whites were slave owners. All whites were complicit with slavery. All whites, had this evil history. And as I recall, we had a civil war in the 1800s.
What?
Man,
Get out of here! A civil war? Wait a second. We're not learning about that. So are you saying that 600,000 Americans died and then the slaves were freed? Get out of here!
Yeah, there's an inconvenient part of history that they overlook, and that inconvenient part of history says, wait a minute. At least half of those white men, those dreaded white men, at least half of them put their lives on the line for people like me so I could be set free.
Yeah.
So how is it that you can tell me that all whites are racist, that all whites were complicit with slavery, that all whites wanted and hated blacks, when at least half of them put their life on the line to set people like me free?
Of course. And that's just an inconvenient truth that nobody wants to talk about. Everyblm.com. Go to his website. It's Kevin McGary. He's the president of this great group, Every Black Life Matters. So 1619 Project is bunk. It's more of a fairy tale. She doesn't go into details about what happened to these former slaves, and they wanted to be productive Americans. They were free. Also, she forgets to mention that the first slave owner in this country was a black man. She forgets talking about how the African tribal chiefs were selling their own family members to make money, and that this was the way of the world back then. And you're right, we forget to talk about the 1800s, where we said, since the founding of the country, since the Declaration of Independence, since our Revolutionary War, there was an argument about slavery. There was a big push to abolish slavery the entire time, and the Democrats wanted to keep people enslaved. The Republican Party was founded to free the slaves. Why do you think that they conveniently forget what happened in the 1800s and that we have strived to be a more perfect nation from our inception?
Well, because it's so dreaded. So let me just, for your listeners, I know you have and I'll try to make it as truncated as best as I can. But
take your time.
In the 1800s, this is what happened, Joe. And so pardon me, I know you're a man of history, you know this, but a lot of your listeners may not. But this is what happened. You did have white supremacists, people that hated blacks, real racists, people that would do anything to keep blacks down.
Absolutely.
They wanted slavery. They encouraged slavery. They ran for office and won offices. They actually put very, very powerful people in place as judges. And so when we did have very important potential judgments that would come along with, Dred Scott decisions and Plessy versus Ferguson and Jim Crow and some of those decisions, their progressive judges voted against us at that time and made sure that they upheld slave positions. When we did have very important legislative acts, like the Homestead Act, for instance, that would have provided blacks an opportunity for land ownership, they put people that oversaw the parcels of land, and they made sure, because they hated blacks, so they made sure that the parcels of land would go to newly immigrated European immigrants, as opposed to providing those parcels of land to blacks, black slaves.
Absolutely.
And so these people hated blacks so much, they basically had a systemic way of making sure that blacks had no ownership, that blacks would be in a perpetual state of slavery, even if they were set free, even after the Civil War and during times of Reconstruction. These people hated blacks, and they set up their various forms of keeping blacks enslaved as long as possible,
Right.
including setting up their own militia, which would include the KKK. And then in the early 1900s, they hated blacks so much they joined, factions that would be like eugenics forums, and they joined with Margaret Sanger and those. And they hated blacks so much that they would put up policies like taking fathers out of the home, and those types of things. So this particular faction of people uh, wanted to encourage the enslavement of blacks as long as possible, including one other thing that's a real inconvenient factor that they gratuitously overlook is Abraham Lincoln he did a sign off on 40 acres and a mule. But when he was assassinated, his vice president just happened to be of the mindset of this other faction that hated blacks. And so his vice president took that off the table. So, this particular faction was a very, very powerful faction of people that hated blacks, white supremacists, racists, and you have today Kendi, D'Angelo, Derek Bell, all of these CRT folks that are
Right.
looking every corner for racists. They have a perfect opportunity to completely identify this particular faction of racists in the 1800s. Never ever in any of their writings do they call out this faction. Why, Joe? Why? I mean, it's there for everybody to see. Why do they never ever in any of their books